He finally got caught. The world's biggest finance guru claims Rich Dad taught him to be rich, real estate rich. Hey, there's an author missing on the back of this book. Well, for the first time ever, I have hard evidence. His whole story, although wild, is fake because
I was a happily married, fat, beta male. Wow, that's simple.
No. What? Hold that thought. This is the untold story of Robert Kiyosaki, and it is ridiculous. It took over a month for me to put this together, but I found out the truth. The real rich dad, the real poor dad, the real author, how they all got rich, the big lie. But does it even matter? This is a hidden camera investigation. People thought they were buying Rich Dad's real story, his secrets, but turns out it was just a sales pitch for courses that cost how much?
Our advanced training ranges from $12,000 to $45,000.
And if we question him,
If you guys are not happy about what I'm saying, leave.
45 grand in 2010 money? How did they pay for that?
so he orders us to call our credit card companies right away and get our limits raised. Then challenges us to go big.
Ask for $100,000.
He even hands out scripts telling us what to say on the
We
phone.
have some scripts.
Let's just put 100 grand on a credit card. So the reporter goes up like, hey, but my dad says.
Is there any risk to raising my credit card? Because my dad always told me,
Were you here while I was doing all this, or you were out?
No, I was here, but I know my dad has always said to me it's not a good idea to have it too
Is
high.
your dad wealthy?
It's okay.
Do what I tell you to do. Do it.
Do what I tell you. Listen, you want 45 grand from a sucker? Start with, don't talk to your dad about this. He's a poor dad, a loser. Give me your money. I'm your new rich daddy. The rich dad speaker says he sold a mobile home for $32 million. Profit. But the reporters drive out to it in Saskatchewan and nothing's there. So the reporters go to Robert and say, why you rich dads always lying? He says, not fair. My partner's hired some fake rich dads. Not fair.
Well, I don't
That's
mean
not
for you
fair.
to feel
Okay,
that
that's
you're
not
under
fair.
attack. I'm
No,
just
no,
looking
that's
for
not fair,
answers
man.
from
That's
people
not
we've been
fair.
speaking to.
It's not fair.
But then another hidden camera investigation just 3 years later found out this.
Now, one of those stories involves a 75-year-old widow in Missouri who took out a second mortgage for the $35,000 cost of a Rich Dad seminar. She later filed a lawsuit that was settled with no admission of liability.
I think it cost us about $15,000. We could have found all of the information they gave us in a book from Barnes & Noble.
At least he can afford to laugh about it. That's not the case for Robert Maurice of Tennessee. Maurice and his wife later filed bankruptcy. The company, without admitting liability, agreed to pay the AG $500,000 plus another $194,000 in restitution to victims who attended seminars. Nor was there mention of this. One of Kiyosaki's companies, Rich Global, filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy last year after getting hit with a $23 million court judgment.
I really think that would have been a nice thing to know.
Yeah, that would be nice to know the real Robert Kiyosaki story. And I have it here for free before you take out a second mortgage. See, Kiyosaki divided the world into rich dads, we'll say alphas, and poor dads, his dad. He calls them losers.
But this is what most people have: go to school, get a job, get a 401k, and save money. Loser.
Those are his betas. And I know it's dumb, that's an alpha, a vicious young elephant seal. But you'll see why this whole idea destroyed him. But why would you portray your own father as a poor dad, a beta loser?
My real dad, or my biological father, was the head of education for the state of Hawaii. I call him my poor dad simply because he was a high-paid government official. He made a lot of money, yet at the end of every month, he was broke.
Broke at the end of each month? Why? Ralph Kiyosaki had 4 kids. That's why people with 4 kids don't have money or dreams or ambitions. Kiyosaki means pure in Japanese. And Robert, your father was pure, right? He was a school teacher?
I hate school.
But why you want to
I hate school. I hate school. School, Marxist. You want to be a Marxist?
Okay, forget it. I was saying Kiyosaki. You're Japanese. Even the most beta, baby, Japanese man will explain to you that they would fight you with a katana for even suggesting they call their father a poor dad, beta loser. Your father was the head of education of all of Hawaii.
The trouble with academics is they're fakes.
Ran for lieutenant governor as As a Republican, you call him a socialist.
The moment my dad, poor dad, declared he was going to run for lieutenant governor as a Republican, which proves how stupid he was in Hawaii, because he should have registered as a communist. He'd been a lot better in Hawaii.
That's not cool. Don't call your dad stupid. That's another beta move. It's just...
Academic system of communists. Just like my poor dad was actually a Marxist, because he never read the Communist Manifesto. But he believed in teachers' union.
Okay, but Dr. Kiyosaki didn't just believe in unions. He became the head of all of Hawaii's teachers' union. That's gangster. It sounds like your dad was an alpha rich dad Hawaiian legend. Or was he a very bad man to you?
When I was 15 years old, I had a bad year. I was failing in school. They threatened me. The school system threatened me. They said I was a stupid kid. I wasn't going to amount to anything, I was going to join my sister's class because they're going to set me back and all this. And here's my dad, the top educator in the whole Hawaiian system. And he looks at me like this, and all he says to me is, screw. He says, don't let them ever take your spirit, son. He says, in my eyes, you can never fail. I will love you always.
I will always love you. He says, screw him. You're no different than anybody else. This is a scene right out of Forrest Gump when they tried to kick him out of school and his mom says,
you are no different.
Your boy's different. His IQ 75.
And then she did screw him, literally, to keep her slow child in school.
Your mama sure does care about your schooling, son.
Both Forrest Gump and Robert Kiyosaki would go on to achieve great wealth despite these cognitive setbacks, but make no mistake, their parents made great sacrifices. Now, the only quote I could find from Robert Kiyosaki's first ex-wife was about his poor dad. In my mind, he was not the poor dad. His spirit and heart were rich. He was a true alpha, nothing like the beta son I married. Okay, I added the beta part, and that's actually Robert Lee, Bobby Lee. He's not even Japanese, but watch. He knows what it feels like to have a boy portray you as a beta publicly.
You deep down are able to become alpha, but you...
Oh, I'm not alpha?
No, right now, if you...
What would you could describe me as? Beta.
Yeah, beta.
You think I'm a...
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate you had potential.
You ever had a 17-year-old call you a little...
No, I didn't.
I'll be honest with you, no, and
it hurt.
Be so angry.
Now, just imagine that little beta shit was your son. Only Dr. Kiyosaki was already in heaven when Robert started portraying him as a poor dad loser beta when this book came out. It's still hurtful. So in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he gives Rich Dad credit for all his financial success. But in his first book, he acknowledges 139 people and not a peep about a rich dad. Robert's top dedication in the book on how he got rich was his poor dad, only he's not poor in this book. He's the best teacher I ever had. Rich Dad, Poor Dad was radically different, almost like a different person wrote it. Question.
How old were you when you became a millionaire?
I don't really remember. It wasn't even in our minds. My best friend and I both met at Xerox in 1974, and we just pushed each other along. And today we're multi-billionaires.
So you're a billionaire?
In debt, yes.
I'm a billionaire? Are you sure? And he just folds? No, I'm actually $1 billion in debt. And nobody forgets when they became a millionaire. Robert, tell us, how did it happen?
Remember these here? These are nylon and Velcro surfer wallets. When I was 26, I began marketing these products worldwide. And that's how I became a millionaire before I was 30.
He tells Oprah surfer wallets at age 26 made him a millionaire before age 30. But his book says he didn't even start business until 1977. He was already about 30, at least 29 3/4, not 26. But by 1978, the surfer wallet business was already out of business. That's what he didn't tell Oprah. He lost his money. He later sold t-shirts, but that business went belly up too.
I can tell the truth or I can keep telling pretty lies.
And when he says he lost his money, take a guess on who funded his early business. Was it his poor dad, who supposedly struggled to save just a few dollars? Yes, Robert swore it couldn't fail. But it did, and his father said nothing about his life savings and only asked what he learned from the lesson. Poor dad. Robert How much did he lose? A few $100?
So I raised another $100,000 from my poor dad. My poor dad second mortgaged his house. He's a good guy, my dad was. Rich Dad turned me down. He says, why should I give you money? You're an idiot. He says, you have a bunch of crooks as partners, which was true.
$100,000 around 1978. That's like $1 trillion today. I don't care how he got it. $100,000 cash back then was rich. This book should say, Rich Dad D gave me so much money, I'm beta. But by 1981, Robert lost everything, and it had jeopardized my father's property. Robert, don't you think that's pertinent info, that you made poor dad poor? But Robert says it was the best thing to happen because that's how he learned to be rich. He has a point, and this is what I don't get about poor people today. If you're poor, just ask your poor dad for like $100,000. 1978 inflation, ask for $1 million today. Ask your poor dad for $1 million and learn to stop being poor. Now, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, different story in 1978. He was a top salesman at Xerox. Tech money. They were Apple and Microsoft combined back then. He was investing in real estate and starts making more cash from real estate than he did at his high-paid sales job. Now, that's FU money. He didn't need to work anymore. That's how he got out of the proverbial rat race at an early age. But Robert, are you sure it was real estate in 1978? That's how you got rich?
When I was just 9 years old, my rich dad began to teach me how to become a real estate investor. And that's how my real estate investment career began, with that simple education and lessons from my rich dad. And that is why I was able to retire in 1994 at a relatively young age of 47 because of the simple investment steps my rich dad taught me.
You know, the problem with property records is they're public. So if Robert was a real estate mogul, Forbes would know. But Forbes reported no one has ever documented vast reserves of wealth prior to the publication of the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad in 1997. So if it wasn't real estate in 1978 and it wasn't surfer wallets in 1978 like he told Oprah because he wrote he lost all his money in 1978, when did he get rich? He's been making millions since 1984, says it right there, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Question then, Robert, why do both you and your ex-wife say you were nearly $1 million in debt and sleeping in a Toyota Celica in 1985? And there's nothing wrong with a Toyota Celica. I had one, fantastic car, but why not spring for a more spacious 1985 van? If you've really been making millions since 1984, there's just no need to make your wife sleep in a little car. Seriously though, what would you do? Homeless, 1985, you're nearly $1 million in debt. It's obvious. Kiyosaki's author bio on Amazon says in 1985, he founded an international education company to teach people the secret to wealth. But Robert, founder? You were founder, is that true?
You started a firm called Money and You?
Yeah. I didn't start it, I was just teaching for it.
Exactly. So you're basically teaching about financial education, but at that time, what really made you qualified? Because you had two businesses that ultimately, you shut down, but you're teaching people finance.
So I started. I was a little student teaching the game. I was teaching from another instructor, and I was just teaching games via games, encouraging people to make mistakes. So my biggest lessons was learning from people I thought were smarter than me, like the accountants and the attorneys. And they turned out to be crooks. Do you know what I mean? It was my lesson, because I thought, like my poor dad was a PhD, I should listen to him, but he was poor.
Okay, just to clarify, your business has failed and you were just a money and you student turned teacher, teaching the lessons of crooks? That's how you got rich? You weren't a founder? It's just a little confusing because your bio says 1985 founder, and then your audiobook specifically says the co-founder of the Accelerated Learning Institute, whose work began in 1978, which only adds more confusion because how do you found a company in 1985 that started back in 1978? And I actually found an old ad from 1990 that Accelerated with an EX was the company behind the Money in You course. His first book even says Accelerated co-founder on it. The Money in You program did in fact start in 1978, but its founder's real name was Marshall Thurber, an attorney teaching accounting. Robert, remind us about the lessons you were teaching.
So my biggest lessons was learning from people I thought were smarter than me, like the accountants and the attorneys. And they turned out to be crooks.
Ah yes, the lessons of crooks, like attorneys and accountants. Attorney Marshall Thurber was Robert's teacher at Money in You, starting in 1980. But he wasn't always a crook. Robert wrote, "Next to my father, he was the best teacher I ever had." The accelerated branding was just their teaching method. They used accounting games to teach about money. Gee, I wonder where Robert got the brilliant idea to make an accounting game to teach about money, and then the brochure that would go with it. But who's this on this old ad? DC Cordova.
I was attending the first business school for entrepreneurs of its kind, which my mentors, Marshall Thurber and Bobby DePorter, created. That was 1978. By 1979, when I was 29 years old, I was already running a company.
DC Cordova quickly became the CEO and owner of the accelerated brand, including Money in You. Now, CEO Cordova, what was it like to be the little partner of this giant, just alpha leader named Robert Kiyosaki?
Actually, how does it feel, the fact that he was my partner? I'm the one that invited him to be my partner. Robert was just a little businessman when he did Money in You. And then he was such a good Marine. So we made Robert publish his first best-selling book called If You Want to Be Rich and Happy, Don't Go to School.
Okay, yeah. Apologies. That makes more sense. CEO Cordova is definitely alpha. DC Cordova inherited all the intellectual property in 1985, became the owner, and brought Robert on not as a founder, but as a partner. She called him a hungry dog, and that's because she's the alpha. CEO Cordova made Robert the face of her Australia expansion, and he had charisma. Everything was going fine until October 1993, when an Australian news show, it's like 60 Minutes, aired a hidden camera investigation and blew up the entire business. It's disturbing. Watch.
To me, I haven't been subjected to brainwashing, and I think if I was, that would be pretty close to what it would be like.
The ones who go on to take the next program, the next program, the next program, look more and more like a destructive cult member.
James was the one who could not walk away.
So what is this? This is the Money in You seminar? Yeah.
He went from one course to another. He took it into his business, his family, and sold it to his friends.
What is going on here?
In the end, his family spent $20,000 having him exit counsel by Stephen Hassan.
Stop. 20 grand for courses in the 90s. No wonder his family, probably a poor dad, ruined everything with an intervention.
That happened because I was effectively controlled by the use of neuro-linguistic programming on a very intense daily basis. I wasn't keeping contact with Money in You because I didn't have to. I'd taken some of Robert Kiyosaki's best friends and put them in my business. I had Money in You on tap on a daily basis in my office.
I don't know why I'm here most of the time. You know, it seems like one day I just sort of 1985, I said, take me, Great Spirit, show me where to go, and I wound up here in Bondi.
Now, this investigation only confirms Robert was making lots of money as a teacher in 1993. Everything blows up, and just a year later, he claims he retired in 1994, age 47, but from real estate and business. But here's the proof of how Robert Kiyosaki actually became wealthy, and it's nowhere to be found on the internet. It's hidden in a book, and not a very good one. I have become wealthy and financially independent through teaching. I was financially able to retire at age 43 solely through my earnings as a teacher. I often earn more in a week than many teachers earn in 3 years. And he talks about making millions throughout the book. This is a done deal, not real estate.
When I was just 9 years old, my rich dad began to teach me how to become a real estate investor. And that is why
I was able to retire in 1994 at a relatively young age of 47 because of the simple investment steps my rich dad taught me.
Not business, solely through teaching. Proof, just a student turned teacher.
I can tell the truth or I could keep telling pretty lies.
There's something really disturbing here in the book that I gotta mention. He found a communist boy. Well, Robert, you tell it.
When I was in Vietnam, I had a chance one day to shoot a little boy. He was a Viet Cong in my aircraft, and I grabbed the kid, and he grabbed me like this, and what he did was he bit my hand, and he kicked me right here, and all of a sudden I got really quiet. I just pulled my gun out, and I heard the Marine Corps saying to me, shh, just shh a little, you know what. All of a sudden I looked in his eyes, and the kid started to cry when he realized I was going to kill him at that moment.
No, you can't just the little boy for kicking you. He wrote it was the code of war. No, there is a code of war, and that would be a horrific war crime. In fact, 18 U.S. Code 2441 says if you can't fight a small child and even put pressure on the trigger, they kick you out of the military for being too beta. That even today they do that. And then you just walked away like you went AWOL, a serious crime?
And at that day on, I refused to fight again for the U.S. military.
Robert, I'm just going to ask you straight up. Were you a liar? Because this story makes no sense.
No, I mean, I told you the story. I got court-martialed for lying. So I sat there one day, I couldn't stand lying anymore. So I said, Captain Abrams, I said, I'm going to tell you the truth. And the reason was I was an entrepreneur, and I got caught. Like one of my first things I got caught at is I was flying women in my helicopter. The second time I got caught, I was flying women in my helicopter drunk. And when they opened up my helicopter, I landed back at the Marine Corps Air Base in Hawaii. The first thing that fell out were my beer cans, and then I fell out. At the end of it, I said, how many years will I get? And he just smiled at me, this little Jewish captain. He looks at me and goes, you're free, congratulations. Honorable discharge. Son, thank you for telling the truth. You'll have an honorable discharge in 6 months.
And that day on, I refused to fight again for the U.S. military. It's one of the hardest decisions I ever made.
And that's when I learned, Vlad, one of the most important lessons in life, the truth can set you free. And ever since then, I'm kind of a stickler on it. When I catch somebody lying, I get a little bit upset, you know.
Shocking. A failed Robert Kiyosaki business involving serious fraud, lying, and people getting screwed. Entrepreneur. You think these women actually paid him money? Well, did they at least keep in touch with you?
Well, after I couldn't fly him into the deserted islands in Hawaii, my sex life was none.
Sad. They used him. But why didn't Robert end the communist boy? Because now he brags about the commies.
I killed a lot of your people. Not funny, but I did. I said play a cash flow game. You better play the game. I mean, what the is wrong with you?
His Money and You book was about transformation. But listen to this. This is how his first book ends. Dr. Kiyosaki had always believed that his son was only interested in money. He had thought that Robert's drive for wealth was selfish and that he was uncaring about the world's problem. This is his own son. However, after reading the book, just before he died, nobody's able to refute this now, he changed his opinion of his son. But what if he didn't? Robert's show is called Rich Dad Radio Show. But Robert, you're not a real dad. Why?
I'd be a terrible father. That was the main reason. You know, I'm a U.S. Marine. I wouldn't want to have a SOB like me as a dad. So, I mean, that's the honest God truth, Vlad. I am. You know, both my dads were tough guys. Most kids can't take it, you know, a bunch of snowflakes today.
What if his father really was a tough guy, looked at the book and said, this is about selling money in you, isn't it? I should have never gave you money, you beta. And then an Australian news investigation talks about a cult destroying people for money.
On a cult in some respects.
Only that's not true. It wasn't a cult. Cults isolate the family. Robert's first book elevated his great father. All wrong. No. Cults start with,
Is your dad wealthy?
Listen, You have a poor dad. Don't talk to him.
Do what I tell you to do.
And then cult leaders make you call some weird dude your father, take your money, and that's why cult leaders are always rich dads. But was Rich Dad even real? When asked in 2002, Kiyosaki replied, "Why don't you treat Rich Dad like Harry Potter? Of course, we all thought Rich Dad's fake, but then he died." Richard Wassman Kimmy's 2009 obituary revealed he was the original Rich Dad. And Richard was rich. Just one of his properties is now called the Hyatt Regency Waikiki Hotel, some of the most expensive real estate ever. Now, this book says working hard is for cavemen, for fools, but Rich Dad's obituary suggests Richard grew up poor, Great Depression poor, worked at his father's store, did construction, side hustles, worked hard every day, and built his first hotel with his hands. Hotel Hukilau, circa 1955. Wait, don't expect similar results and go out and buy a trailer park in Saskatchewan on your credit card just yet. The first jet arrived in Honolulu shortly after in 1959 and created one of the fastest growing tourism industries in the history of the world, which skyrocketed property prices throughout Hawaii. You want a couple Honolulu acres now? $55 million, but that's poor people acres, way cheaper than Rich Dad's Waikiki Strip, and that was just where one of his hotels was. He didn't just work hard in the right industry, he hit the human lottery. Robert, are you sure he started off poor?
So let's wrap this up. The lessons I learned from Rich Dad. For me, the biggest thing was that he wasn't rich when we met him, when Al and I were kids.
Yeah, you're right. That's what his obituary suggests. It's just that I wonder about these self-made men, like, who was Rich Dad's father? The newspaper on the day of the grand opening of his first hotel, Hotel Hukilau, August 18, 1955, it paints a slightly different picture. It congratulates William J. Kimmy, not Richard Kimmy, as the owner of the Hotel Hukilau, who started the project in 1945 and invested $200,000. It's like $1 trillion in today's money. His son, Richard Kimmy, that's Rich Dad, was present, but not as the owner, but as the son of the owner, who made him president of the new hotel. Richard Kimmy's father was William J. Kimmy, a senator and successful businessman, including the owner of an impressive hotel chain. Rich Dad's dad was Rich AF. This book could be called Rich Son, How to Become Rich. Start off with a powerful, rich Hawaiian father during one of the largest real estate booms the world has ever seen. You still want to put $100,000 on your credit card for a trailer park in Saskatchewan? Anyway, Alan, aka Mike, what did you think about Poor Dad? Total beta loser, right?
Yeah, Dr. Ralph was very straight arrow, very strict, very respectful to Robert's mother. And they were a family unit that I didn't have because my parents got divorced early. So I loved hanging around the Kiyosaki's house, plus the food was good.
No, Poor Dad provided a family unit Rich Dad couldn't afford, and the respect he calls him Dr. Ralph. And now Rich Dad's not a good guy in the book. There's a reason he didn't want to be in it. Everyone in town thinks he's a crook, a greedy crook, including Dr. Ralph Kiyosaki. He exploited people. He exploited Robert, screwed them out of money. He says people exploit themselves. But it was tough love. He was teaching Robert lesson 1. The rich don't work for money. Robert, please clarify why you were always getting exploited by him.
And finally, we took the dollar because we were so desperate. We'd gone like a month without any money. But at the final, we took the money and he was laughing. He was just laughing his ass off. I said, "Why are you laughing?" He says, "It's the most valuable lesson you can have." I said, "What's that?" He says, "If you need money, you'll always work for less."
Good lesson.
And I never forgot that lesson. So even when I had no money, nobody knew I had no money.
Good lesson. Somebody send this secret to the children mining cobalt for iPhones in the Congo. World hunger solved. And maybe he was just laughing because he was just a mean old man exploiting children for fun. But how did Rich Dad make the most profit ever in his career?
They found the guy with the bulldozer because all of the military was there with bulldozers. And Rich Dad goes, Just have them, give them $200 and push it into the ocean. And that's how they cleared the land. I mean, there's story after story after story of whatever it takes, and he's a great example of that.
And as Alan said, they're up and running in 7 months. That was the most profitable time of their entire career.
Listen to them. They're just all giddy about destroying a Hawaii beach. Hurricane Iniki hit in 1992, at the time the most powerful hurricane to ever hit Hawaii. And while other hotels waited for resources, Rich Dad just pushed a destroyed hotel into the ocean. And look, I'm no environmentalist. I tend to side with Ron Swanson's philosophy.
My idea of a perfect government is one guy who sits in a small room at a desk, and the only thing he's allowed to decide is who to nuke.
But now I can't, because environmentalists can just say, what about Kimmy? Pushing hotels into the ocean, Jeremy. You still want to be a libertarian? Destroying the reef, glass, nails, rebar. You know what happens when a little Hawaiian boy falls on rebar on a rocky beach? Not good. Regulations. Government regulations. Plus, it's very hard for a tiny boy to pull rebar out of his own stomach. Now, Robert, you were technically court-martialed for lying, but you stole a military helicopter, drunk, and had women pay you, supposedly, facing years in prison. How did Rich Dad help you?
And I went to ask my rich dad, I said, would you mind speaking out for me? And the family said no. And I want you to know something, Vlad. The rich don't tell people what they know. So there is a rich dad. When I asked him if he would help me, he says no. So that's what really happened. And so I wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and then Oprah called.
Wait, Oprah, no. How did his story end? What about the plan? Did Rich Dad win at life?
He started with nothing. So his plan was to buy a whole section of Waikiki Beach, and he bought it. So today it belongs to the family. But the second generation was my best friend and I. The third generation was his son. Guess what?
Son squandering it?
It's gone. The third generation lost it all.
Because they didn't learn the skills required to build it.
They had a good time. Plus.
Oh, really?
That's the moral of this story? What are we doing here? Be a rich dad and your grandchildren will squander it all with... What? Why'd you really write this book?
The fact of the matter was I created this board game called Cash Flow.
Yeah.
And I couldn't sell the board game. So I had to write a brochure. And the brochure I wrote was Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So the real fact of the matter is Cash Flow is about accounting. Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a book on accounting.
And if you ask him, it's just him alone in the desert, bored, writing a book on accounting.
And I just wrote because I had nothing else to do. Otherwise, I'd watch TV.
Sharon, how did you write Rich Dad, Poor Dad?
When I wrote it, I was determined to write it where we would take the complex subject of money and make it easy to understand. So that was the goal. I wrote as I speak so that people didn't get turned off by grammar or that type of thing. And it was actually written as a brochure to promote the game behind you.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yes. I met Robert at a beta test of the game, and I had already built a global brand of talking children's books. And during that process, he told me he wanted to charge $200 for the game. And this was 1996. So that's pretty pricey. Maybe you should write a brochure that explains the philosophy that people can read, and then they're willing to invest the money in the game. And that's when he asked me to be his partner. And that brochure that we wrote together was Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
That's Sharon Lecter. She worked at a top accounting firm, a real accountant. Imagine that, writing a book on accounting. And look, it says Robert, teacher, Sharon, businesswoman, a writer too. She published a woman's magazine and then became the publishing executive rock star that, you know, those Talking Elmo books, the Elmo Sesame Street books? You can thank her for that. Advisor to Presidents Obama and Bush. She's obviously alpha. And look at her LinkedIn. It says Rich Dad, founder, not co-founder, and CEO. Robert wasn't the CEO. She ran the show and was responsible for the growth of the largest personal finance brand.
So I took him for 9 years to one level, got him prepped up, and he called me on the phone when he met Sharon, because she was going to be the one that took him to the next level.
And she's sharp. I saw a Grant Cardone interview. She treats finance gurus like toddlers.
They got some debt in college. Should they pay their debt right now? Should they pay their debt out first?
That depends. You're an accountant, that's our favorite response. It depends on their personal situation.
Robert's first book was repetitive, painfully slow, inconsistent, smelled a little commie, but this book, it's concise, has a clear voice, bestseller for over 25 years, and it smells like a CEO alpha wrote it. And obviously no alpha woman calls her own dad poor. Robert Kiyosaki was willing. He had charisma. He's what other alpha female leaders might call a hungry dog. It wasn't possible without her. There's no way. And I think by removing her name, he loses all credibility. Sharon also just happened to co-write 15 Rich Dad books. What a coincidence. And Sharon was the publisher for the first 1 million copies of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, selling them right out of her house. 1 million copies, that's unheard of. How did you pull it off?
You find somebody that's already in that geographic location and they can take what you do and spread it in their world. It's win-win.
Lesson 1, the rich don't work for money, but she's too smart to say who was working for free. Who'd she exploit? Rumor has it that Amway promoted the book, made it a bestseller. To promote multi-level marketing, Amway paid $56 million after being accused of a pyramid scheme to exploit people. Rich Dad would say they exploit themselves. But other than this old video of Kiyosaki promoting MLMs, there's zero proof online that he became rich and famous off the back of this pyramid scheme. I found nothing, and I can find stuff. Unless, Robert, is there something you want to add in your old age?
Was the interview with Oprah, is that what kind of put it over the top?
That was one of them, but I was already on the bestseller list. So when I published Rich Dad, Poor Dad, nobody would buy the damn book. And I was very much against network marketing. The pyramid scheme, all the things they say about it. So my friend told me to shape up and shut my mouth and go check them out. So when I checked out network marketing, I said, oh my God, they're doing what my Rich Dad told me to do, is learn how to sell. So in my little book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I put an asset is a network marketing, assets, liabilities. I said, you build a network marketing building, it's business, it's an asset. And guess who bought the first book? An Amway distributor.
That's why I love old people. They just don't care anymore. So the goal of a pyramid scheme, it's like what Rich Dad preaches. It's the goal of an alpha elephant seal. The alpha battles to get to the top, hurts nearly everyone below him, exploits them, and takes all the spoils for himself. He screws, literally, almost all of them. Now they say that's just doing business. Business is risky, but an FTC study on their website found it's not comparable to business. And less than 1% of MLM participants profit. Alphas take it all. Everyone else below them gets screwed. Problem is, human alphas aren't real. I know, I've been a sarcastic prick. That whole alpha, beta, human thing, it's not real. Because humans must also earn trust and respect, or people will revolt against any leader. Communist academics call it social capital. People must believe the little guy is also being helped, at least a little, or they turn on you. So it's 2007, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is flying off the shelves. Mortgage brokers are using the script, take on debt to sell people bad loans. Listen. Tim Dillon was actually one of them. Listen.
So the reality is this. We're taking the biggest loan possible. Debt, Mr. Pappas, will set you free. Now sign this piece of paper for Christ.
Yeah.
And then we sign papers, then you go die.
But how do you get the loan from the bank? How did you do it?
Go to the bank. I said, Kelly, we got one. And Kelly, I said, Mr. Pappas and his wife Brittany's from Long Island. They want to go buy a piece of marble hunk of shit. And Kelly has got Coke running down her nose from last night. She's got a double tall non-fat latte from Starbucks non-fat. She's not getting anyone.
Debt will set you free. And then they all go bankrupt a year later in 2008. In fairness, Tim says they exploited themselves a little. Nobody is forcing you to just take hundreds of thousands of dollars. But Sharon, you were making millions in 2007. Why'd you quit at the top?
Well, we were partners for 10 years and I chose to leave because he wanted to go in a direction that I didn't believe in. And it was a great direction for us. He wanted to go into franchising. So it was very profitable for us, not very profitable for the franchisees. So I could not in good stead stay there. But it had become a very difficult couple of years because money just brings out more of who you really are. And so I made the decision at the height of our success. We were making millions of dollars every month, but I said I just couldn't stay there. So we have not really been in communication other than it took a few months for us to get the valuation of the company, and then our amicable split turned not so amicable. So we were in litigation for a year and settled. So, in essence, I was able to walk away the way I wanted to. And then 11 years later, he sent me a letter of apology. But other than that, we haven't really been in communication. He became, he can tend to be a bit volatile. So
Sharon accused Robert of transferring millions of dollars in cash to cheat her out of payments. She settled in court for $10 million in payback. As for being volatile, Robert wouldn't do that.
And if you read my books, because I don't think you have.
I read.
In 1971, the U.S. dollar became debt. The U.S. dollar is the reserve currency of the world. I don't know if you know what that means. What does it mean?
It's very dangerous for everyone.
No, it doesn't.
And it's not covered in anything. It's the only value it has is trust.
I don't really want to do this interview anymore. If you want to find out what I know or tell me what you know, then don't interview me. Just you do your own stupid show.
Robert, what was the reason you don't pay your honest debts?
Well, one of the things you say is that the poor pay their bills first, the rich pay themselves first.
The richest man in Babylon says pay yourself first. But what most people do is they pay their bills first and they never pay themselves anything. And that's a discipline I had to get into, was I always pay myself first, even when I had no money. And when I have all these bill collectors calling me, I use them as inspiration. You know what I mean?
Really?
Oh.
What? One of Rich Dad's core lessons is pay yourself first. He told Oprah that from the rich, but it's from the richest man in Babylon. Robert, did you even?
And if you read my books, because I don't think you have.
Did Robert even read the book?
One of my favorite books was The Richest Man in Babylon. Are there any books out there, apart from yours, of course, that you really admire and have really changed your life?
That's a very good question because, again, I read those books and I didn't get much from it. I was a student of Buckminster Fuller.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes sense. I mean, you probably shouldn't have made it a core lesson, but before people take out $100,000 on credit card debt, they might want to know the real story. The richest man in Babylon says, no man can respect himself who does not repay honest debts. Also, he must take care of his family that they may think and speak well of him. Like, don't call your dad poor dad after taking his life savings. The book is actually about being honest. And now that you know that, Robert, how do you feel about paying back your honest debt?
So that's $1.2 billion in debt because if I go bust, the bank goes bust. Not my problem. You know what I mean?
No, I do know what you mean. After Sharon quit in 2007, things spiral, which is odd because Robert is just a business genius. But things spiral. There was this news investigation where Robert blamed his partners for everything.
People feel that it's more a big sales pitch to spend more money on Rich Dad than actually getting a basic education in real estate.
Well, I agree with what you're saying, and it is a challenge for me.
He agrees?
But these guys are doing, they're not my company.
But this is a Rich Dad seminar. It's branded Rich Dad. So if you're happy to take their money, you should be happy to answer some of their concerns.
Ma'am, I will definitely look into it. I promise you that.
But the partners, Learning Annex, the company that hosted the Rich Dad seminars, comes back. And they say, actually, Robert didn't pay us over $23 million of honest debt. The courts say, pay up. But after making $45 million, Rich Global, LLC, only had $1.8 million in their bank total. They filed for bankruptcy. Robert, can you talk about where all the money went? You were just in one pocket, and where'd the rest go?
I'd really rather not. Okay, I mean, what we're talking about, it was just a political move. Bankruptcy is a way of getting out of a bad situation, but everybody thinks of it as terrible. It's just a strategic move. So if you want to know about it, call my fucking attorneys.
Well, fair enough. We're all friends here. Well, you have been very public about how this all somehow turned you into a beta. Your wife left. You've You've talked about it on a lot of cool guy podcasts. Can you at least talk about that?
So I've had so many horrible partners. It cost me $30 million to get rid of my last one because they're scumbags. Now, this is where my wife stepped up and where I didn't, Rich. She cleaned them out. I didn't really care how much they stole. But my wife did, and Kim, and she's a beautiful blonde. She's thin, but she's not weak. And she went in and fired them all. She cleaned house. And that's when she cleaned house with me too.
Okay, yeah, well, I actually believe that. Clearly, these women are all alphas. They took advantage of you, and you're not fooling anyone. But how are you getting back? How are you getting back to alpha?
Did you go through betatization through 1,000 concessions?
Yes, it's not cheating her that counted. It's I stopped chasing excellence. She never did. I was pushing, double XL polo shirts and 40-inch waist, and I'm a Marine. You don't do that shit. And so today I'm down to a 32-inch waist and a 40-inch chest. I'm in the stacks, like you say, 5 days a week now. And I'm making more money, I'm working harder. As I say, the more I chase excellence, the more women I have.
Oh no, Robert, this is where things went all wrong. Your whole life, you got it all wrong. Elephant alpha seals are actually very big and fat, and they destroy everyone else for mating. The females literally can't get away from them. The alphas are just too fat. Humans are different. They can just walk away slowly, and if they think it was all about money for you, they'll just slowly walk away with all your money too at the first chance they get. The only reason getting rich and fit worked for Forrest Gump, his love, Jenny, came back, was because she was poor and had AIDS and wanted to take advantage of a cognitively impaired man. But Robert, don't think that's all it takes. Forrest Gump also had a heart of gold, built a lifetime of trust, and paid back all of his debts.
And even though Bubba was dead, and Lieutenant Dan said I was nuts, I gave Bubba's mama Bubba share.
Oh, I forgot to mention the most important part of all of this. There was a critical warning in The Richest Man in Babylon. I wish you read it, Robert. If you're not honest, you don't build that honest trust, you don't respect your family, you don't pay back your honest debt, your wife will leave you, and you will be forced to leave Babylon because you will be beta, and everyone will know it. The end.